Hi everyone, thanks for clicking on the video. I've been hinting at making this video for a few episodes now. I will forewarn you, if you're not into ATVs, this one's not the one for you. You might want to go watch something else, but certainly stay tuned if you want to learn a little bit about my thoughts about ATVs. This isn't really going to be a comparison between one particular brand and another. It's more of a review, although I will be doing plenty of comparisons between brands. I will also say that going back to this channel is really not about ATVs, but it's about my life and how I came from America here to Lithuania. But having an ATV is a big part of that life. When I first moved here, really it was for work. There was a lot of work that needed to be done in the yard, a lot of hauling and moving of things. Now it's more of a blend between work and play. When we do actually get some snow, which we did last year, in previous years, I do use it for plowing snow. It works great for that, but just generally. Also, I do use it for fixing our road. Again, we live on a dirt road, which kind of goes to hell every so often, just due to rain and traffic. So we usually get a bunch of dirt delivered, and I fill up a little utility dump trailer and pull it behind this, and I go around the road and I fill in the holes. I like doing it, but again, it wouldn't be possible without the ATV in the trailer. But generally, again, I just kind of use it for fun. Out in the forest, there's a lot of nice trails and roads and paths that I like to go visit. So that's pretty much what I use it for. Give you a little bit more history, and I've mentioned this on previous videos, that I actually sent an ATV here to Lithuania when we moved in a shipping container. It was a Polaris Sportsman. It was brand new. Loved it, but once we got it here, I realized and found out I couldn't register it. I couldn't legally ride it on the roads or elsewhere because of a lot of the regulations, differences between the US and here in Lithuania. For example, you can see this new one, which is a CFMOTO, and it's not new, it's, I don't know, 3 years old or more, but it's got mirrors, turn signals, a horn, you name it. So that is required, and my Polaris that I sent from America didn't have any of that. Of course, I could have added mirrors, I could have added turn signals, I could have probably added a horn, but the one big missing piece is this is actually registered as a tractor, believe it or not. It's not registered as like a motorcycle. And that registering it that way allows me to not have to have a motorcycle license. I can just drive it with a normal driver's license. But because it's registered as a tractor, it has to have a certain setting on the odometer, not really odometer, but it has to record how many hours it's been used versus kilometers and miles. My Polaris didn't have that. I don't think there's any way I could have added it. So I'll cut to the chase on that and just say I loved that Polaris. It was a great machine. I probably would still have it if I could have registered it and ridden it legally, but I couldn't, so I decided to get this. I would have loved to keep the Polaris, but I just don't have the room for it, so I ended up selling it to a young guy here who's actually since then put on some big mud tires, and I think he might even put a snorkel on it, which, whatever, good for him. It's his machine. I'm not a big fan of doing that to a machine, but so that's how I ended up with this. I'll go into more of the brand comparisons and likes and dislikes here in a moment, but stay tuned. And I mentioned my Polaris that I had bought in the US and sent here to Lithuania. Throughout this video, here's a couple pictures from both US and Lithuania of that. It was a Sportsman 570. I think it was a 2016 model. So as I mentioned in the previous clip, this is, I think it's a 2021 model. I think I've had it about 3 years now. You can see it's filthy. Sorry about that. I don't clean it very often, but living where I live, even if you clean it, it doesn't last long. It's not plugged full of mud. It's mainly just dust and some spatterings, but this is a CFMOTO. The first time I've ever had a CFMOTO. I've always been a Polaris guy. I'm not really saying Polaris is the best. I've just always liked Polaris, and I've always had good luck with Polaris. I've never had a Yamaha or a Can-Am, but I've been around them enough, and I watch a ton of videos on YouTube and comparisons and good and bad about each. And you know, again, I've just always kind of been a Polaris guy. As I mentioned in the previous clip, I sent a brand new Polaris from the States here to Lithuania, and I loved the machine. It was great, but just due to the again, as I mentioned, you know, some of the regulations to get it registered. You can see here, this one is registered. It does have a proper license plate on it, etc. But I ended up needing to get a new machine, and my initial thought was not to get a CFMOTO. You know, my thought was, you know, it's Chinese garbage. You know, why would I buy Chinese garbage? So I went into the local ATV shop and you know, explained my situation and kind of said, you know, hey, I'm looking to buy a new ATV that I can register here. And just naturally, I had him check into Polaris. And he said, are you sure you want Polaris? I said, sure, that's exactly what I've always had. I love them. And he said, well, what about CFMOTO? And I said, oh, I don't know. And I don't know, I had a long discussion with him, and he kind of talked me into going with the CFMOTO based on what I want to do with it and other things. You know, the old saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Here in Lithuania and really Europe in general, CFMOTO is the top selling ATV by far. And that means that parts are easy to come by, service is pretty much guaranteed, they know how to work on them. There are people with Polaris and Yamahas, etc. here, but CFMOTO is by far the best selling. And again, that doesn't make them the best. Obviously, McDonald's sells more burgers than steakhouses sell steak. That doesn't make the burgers better. But anyhow, and the other thing that I want to mention is a lot of people who buy or review these CFMOTOs, the first thing they always talk about is value. And it is a good value, but before I get into why it's a good value, that's not why I bought it. Money wasn't my objective. Again, I was planning on and ready to spend the 11,000 euros to get a new Polaris, whereas this one was about, I think, 8,000 euros. But I didn't do it to save money. I was happy to pay whatever they wanted for the Polaris. But again, they talked me into getting into the CFMOTO. And back to the value thing, it is a great value. It is, you get so many things with it. I mean, basically what you see came standard, with a few exceptions that I'll talk about here in a second. But, you know, it comes with the nice hand guards, which my Polaris did not have. And I really like them, although, you know, it wouldn't take much probably to break them. But, you know, some of the bigger, higher cost things is, you know, the winch. It comes standard with it. Now, I'm guessing it's probably not as good as like a worn winch that you would get with the Polaris, but it's not bad. I've actually used it quite a bit. Not so much to pull myself out of trouble, but to move heavy things. We've got a little plow that we use in the garden to kind of furrow our potato plants, and we use this to pull that plow, and it works great. Really happy with it, but you know, that's a $400 or $500 option on Polaris that you don't get. The headlights are amazing, although I don't really care. I never really had problems seeing on any of my Polarises, although these are better. They really shine. They're all LED, but some people go on and on about the headlights, but it is standard. It comes standard with power steering. You can see electronic power steering. I did get the 2-up model. I'm kind of regretting that a little bit. I kind of thought maybe my wife would go riding with me a little bit more, but It's not bad. I like the longer build model with that 2-up, but it does reduce, the space I've got available for the rack a little bit. Taillights look great. Again, I don't really care how it looks. I just care how it works, but it's not bad to have something look good. It does actually come with a pigtail plug-in if you wanted to hook up a trailer, which, Polaris doesn't. I don't think I would ever use that, but it goes on and on, the things you get standard with this that you don't get with Polaris, and it's a lot less money. As far as reliability, that was my biggest hesitation. Again, I just, like a lot of Americans, I thought, Chinese crap, it's going to be bad. And the CFMOTO's been around quite a long time, probably 15, 20 years, if not more. And I had seen some earlier models, and they were crap. The build quality was bad. The carburetor had issues, but they've come a long ways. And even though, yes, it is a Chinese company, they have partnered, I believe, with KTM to build these latest models, like let's say the last 6-7 years. So they've come a long ways. It starts and runs absolutely perfect. I like I said, I've had it over 3 years now. I haven't had any engine problems with it whatsoever, or transmission problems whatsoever. It's been great. I think that it's got a Bosch carburetor on it, which is, I think, an improvement on some of their older models from 10-15 years ago. I have had one issue, or one thing that I did have to fix. That's this parking brake, which is required, by the way. If you don't set this parking brake while you're parked, an alarm will go off. I know there's a way to disable that, but this thing actually broke on me. The cable actually snapped at one point in time, so I did have to replace that. It wasn't a big job, but it wasn't a lot of fun either, because I had to take a lot of the panels off and everything to run the cable. But that's the only problem I've had with this thing. Everything else is just really, I'm really impressed with it. I had mentioned earlier that this is pretty much stock. I did add on this set of wheels and tires. I still have the original set, really nice aluminum rims with, I think, 25-inch tires. These are 26-inch tires, a little bit taller. I didn't really get them so they'd be taller, although the extra inch does help with other things. But the pattern on the tires that it came with, they weren't bad, but honestly, in mud or especially snow, they just weren't that great, so I went with these. I only run these in the fall, winter, and spring. I put the original ones back on for the summer. Again, they're just good for tootling around in the summertime. But these, are definitely better in the mud, although I don't go looking for mud. I'll probably mention that again here in a minute or two. But mainly it's snow, especially when I'm plowing snow. This pattern is really excellent. These tires are excellent. Stag, I don't remember who makes them, but again, I only keep these on for 3 seasons. I run the other ones in the summer. So I added that on. I did add on the heated hand grips, which is kind of a necessity around here if you're going to ride in the winter time, especially when you're an old man like me. I did add on a plow. You can see the quick connection here. Real happy with the plow. So generally, I'm really happy with this machine, way more happy than I thought I would be. I really had some reservations when I got it. However, there are some things that I don't like about it. I'm on the front end here. Now, I don't know what these are called, the sway bars or the A-arms, all of this bar action. You can see this one here is not much bigger than my pinky, maybe a little bigger than my pinky. That same part on my Polaris was as big as my thumb or bigger. So it was really built a lot more, I think, sturdy on the Polaris when it comes to things like, these types of parts.
And you can see here, I'll talk a little bit about the guards here in a second, but you know, this little plastic guard, it sort of protects that rubber CV boot, but nothing like the Polaris. The Polaris had nice guards that came out and protected everything. The biggest thing from a protection standpoint is like a skid pan or underneath. I can't really get the camera underneath there to show you, but basically it is awful on this CFMOTO. It's just a thin piece of plastic that really isn't going to protect you from anything more than some small brush. If you hit a big stick or a rock or something like that, I don't know what would happen, but it's probably not going to be good. My Polaris, it was solid. I mean, you could drop that thing onto a pretty big log or a pretty big rock, and you really didn't have to worry. You know, it made an awful sound, but you didn't have to worry about it getting to your oil pan or your engine. So this thing from an underside protection standpoint is terrible. You can see here on the back it doesn't even have guards. It's got a little hole where you can add it on, but it doesn't have anything to protect that rubber CV boot, all these. And again, the Polaris had all that. So that's one thing I kind of don't like about this thing. As far as the power, it's kind of weird because they advertise it as a 625, and it certainly is not 625 cc's. I think it's about the same size as my Polaris, which was 570 cc's. And this gets about 4 or 5 horsepower less than my Polaris, which the horsepower itself doesn't bother me. I'm an old man. I just kind of tootle around. I don't go racing. But you know, some of the things that does bother me is the low end, like torque is non-existent. Like if I'm turning this thing around and I back it into a rut or something, I basically cannot get out of that rut in high range. I need to switch it to low range or four-wheel drive to get out of it. Or even if you're on a little incline trying to go uphill from a dead stop, this thing has no low end torque. Now, once you get into the mid-range, you know, the bandwidth, or power band, I guess they call it, it's fine. You push the throttle and it responds, and you've got some power. So on the low end, it's awful. Whereas my Polaris, you know, you could have it in high range, you could back it into whatever deep rut you wanted to, and it would climb right out. It didn't even pause or grunt. So that's one complaint. You know, again, build quality. I think they're all kind of getting to be poor build quality in some aspects. A lot of plastic, these little plastic covers with the rubber grommets. I think they're all doing it. Polaris, Can-Am, etc. So I can't really hold CFMOTO guilty of that, although, you know, it sure seems like they made them better years ago, or at least stronger, a lot less plastic. But like the paint is automotive quality paint. That looks good. A lot of little adapters here for the 12 volt and USB, which, you know, I don't really need that much. It does have Bluetooth. It just tells you if, for example, you've got a text message on your phone, which again, I don't need that at all. I need that about as much as an outhouse needs an elevator. But anyhow, it is there if you need to use it. So again, overall, I'm really happy with it. And like everybody says, for the value, for what you pay, it is excellent value. Would I get it again? You know, I probably would. However, as I mentioned with some of the things that I don't like, if I had this when I was 20 years old, I would destroy it probably in a month. It wouldn't hold up if you're really going to ride it like you stole it, so to speak. But now I'm an old man. I kind of just tootle around. It works for me. You know, again, would I do it again? I don't know. I'm probably going to be back into the market for another one here in a couple years. You know, I'm probably going to look at the Polaris again, but I wouldn't rule this out. As far as just brand comparison, again, I've never owned a Yamaha. I've never owned a Can-Am. I've always been a Polaris guy. You know, there's your question, what's the best one? And I don't think there is a best ATV. It really depends on what you need it for and how you're going to use it. If you want reliability, I think a lot of people would agree, Honda is going to be your best bet. Those engines in those Hondas just go and go and go, and you don't have problems with them. If your priority is power, maybe you want something like Can-Am or Polaris. But if you don't really care about power, or that's the most important thing, ride, that's another thing that I forgot to mention about this, that the ride, it's not bad, but it's not good either, especially compared to my Polaris. That Polaris was so smooth. And I know you can adjust the shocks on these things to make them a little softer, but I never had to do that on the Polaris. But I think generally, Polaris, Yamaha, they're all going to be a better ride than this Can-Am. Than this CFMOTO. So that's a big thing there too. But if you want ride, CFMOTO is probably not the way to go. As far as other things, options, the Yamaha, I don't think you can get the 2-up. If you don't need the 2-up, who cares? I'd love to have a side-by-side. And again, it's not that I'm trying to be cheap or don't want to spend the money on a side-by-side, but I just don't have the room to store it. And worse yet, where I go out there in the forest, I don't know if I could get in and out of a lot of places I need to go with a side-by-side. I can barely squeeze in with this thing. So I guess in summary, there is no best ATV. It's going to be the best ATV for you or for whoever is riding it. If you're just tootling around doing some small chores, or if you're just doing some trail riding, a lot of them will work for you. Again, if you're going to do the mud bogging thing and put a snorkel on it, which again, I don't agree with that. If you want a boat, get a boat. Why would you put your ATV underwater on purpose? I never go looking for the mud. If I can get around it, I'll get around it. But just living where I live, mud is a factor. You got to go through the mud every once in a while to get to where you need to go. And that's why I go with these tires, because they're excellent. And, hopefully that fills you in on why I've got a CFMOTO. And again, I'm not recommending any particular brand or saying anyone is best. It's you got to do the research and figure out what works best for you. But I've been real happy with this. If you're going to kind of use it the way I use it, I think you'll be happy with it too. Again, I'm not saying that's what I'll get next. I think I'll definitely look into the Polaris again, just for nostalgia's sake. I'm kind of a Polaris guy, but I've been real happy with this. So I'll wrap it up. I know I'm starting to repeat myself. I'm sure there was a couple other things I was going to mention, but that's it for my ATV review / comparison. If you guys have any questions or comments, try to keep them nice, but definitely provide your feedback in the comments. We'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks.